Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Wildlife Center of Virginia's annual gala. Things are super different this year, but thanks so much for hanging in there with us and exploring this new platform that is the Wildlife Center's first virtual gala. You're helping to make it a success. Thank you so much. Your support, your contributions, and your winning bids ensure that the Wildlife Center will have the ability to care for and to house and to treat and to feed thousands of injured and orphaned wildlife patients that come through our doors in the next few months. Thanks so much for your support.
Okay, we're gonna wait. I'm watching that flag over there. Okay, you all about ready? Yeah. All right.
I think she is.
One. Whoops, wind's picking up. All right, hang on a second. We're getting the gust. I'll start again. All right, 1, 2, 3.
Go girl.
And it doesn't get any better than that.
Woo!
See her stretch there?
Yeah.
Because I had wrinkled up her feathers. She stretched her legs down to get her feathers straight. I'll tell you what, that's... People ask me if it ever gets old. What do you think?
No.
Heck no is right. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Now he may go through the trees, he may just go up there and sit. Nope, he went through and he'll sit.
You're on, Randy.
Hey, good evening and welcome to That's What I'm Talking About. I'm Randy Huwa. I'm Executive Vice President of the Wildlife Center of Virginia, and it is my pleasure to be sharing this platform with our own Ed Clark, President and co-founder of the Wildlife Center. We're going to talk about eagles. We're going to talk about releasing eagles. Let me just start with a few statistics to kind of give us a little bit of a background here, and then we'll talk to Ed. From 2008 to 2020, the Wildlife Center of Virginia released 94 bald eagles back into the wild. 94 bald eagles that got a second chance on life because of the work of the Wildlife Center. And most of those eagles were released by Ed. In just the last 8 years, center staff, and this again is mostly Ed, have driven 9,742 miles from Waynesboro to eagle release sites across Virginia. And that's just the one-way trip, 9,742 miles, which is the one-way mileage equivalent of a trip from Waynesboro to Sydney, Australia.
Wow.
And then back again. Now, a few of the eagles that Ed has released, that we have released, have had transmitters. And those eagles, as we've been tracking them, some of them have gone as far south as South Carolina, and some of them have gone as far north as New Brunswick in Canada or Quebec in Canada. So if you've seen a bald eagle on the East Coast, there's a chance that it's an eagle that was released by none other than Ed Clark. So enough from me, let's talk to Ed. And my first question for you, Ed, is the title of this session is, That's What I'm Talking About. What does that mean?
Oh, Lord. Well, first of all, it's great to be here with everybody this evening, and thank you all for being here with us, especially to talk about eagles, and especially to talk about eagle releases, which is the most fun part about eagles. That's what I'm talking about is something that popped out one time when I had described to people what they should watch for after I release the eagle. There is a moment in time for many of the eagles, not for all of them. The one I released this week was an exception, but a lot of times they will fly out and their first 25 to 40 yards, they're trying to get away from me. So they're just aimed out. They're trying to get away. And then all of a sudden, there's this moment at which they realize I'm free. And you can almost see them set their wings and, get the crinks out of their neck and look around like, yeah. And one of them did that very overtly at a release, and I yelled, "That's what I'm talking about." Well, then that phrase suddenly got picked up by the Eagle Nation and eagle lovers everywhere that had known about that, and it has become our own instant cliche. So that's what I'm talking about.
Tell us a little bit, just to bring us all up to date. You released an eagle on Tuesday. Tell us a little bit about that. How did it go? Reactions, your thoughts?
Well, it was fun. The bird had come from Suffolk, Virginia, and Tidewater, Virginia, down in the southeastern corner of Virginia, and apparently had been in a little scuffle with another eagle. And this bird was beautiful, but apparently not a very good scuffler because he had his stuffings whooped and had been pretty well beaten up by whatever other eagle with whom he was engaged in eagle fisticuffs. And so when we got him, he had a lot of soft tissue injuries, nothing major, and it just took some time for him to heal up. And so he was ready to go back. Well, the closest place to the spot from which he had been rescued was actually not in the city of Suffolk. It was in Portsmouth, Virginia, which was the Hoffler Creek Wildlife Preserve, where we've released an eagle for the first time earlier this year. And it worked out pretty well. It's a small preserve in the city of Portsmouth, but we had to get special permission to release the bird in a county or a city other than that from which he was found or in which he was found. So we finally, on Monday, quite literally, got the permission, sent out an email to just the handful of people we wanted to be there. And the folks at the wildlife preserve, Hoffler Creek, Ashley Morgan is the director down there, just an absolutely lovely, lovely person and very gracious to us. Well, when I got there, I was a few minutes late because I had to stop for gas and there were a few other little unexpected delays in my trip. So I didn't get there until about 10 minutes after the appointed hour, which is unusual. Well, there must have been about 30 people there waiting on me, and I have no idea how those people found out about it, but the word of mouth spreads pretty quickly. So the bird was an adult bird, a male bird, not a terribly large bird. And our great staff at the Wildlife Center are always very good to me. When I'm releasing an eagle, they will put a hood on them, which covers their eyes so that they're very calm, and they put in a tail guard, they call it, which is just very thin sheets of plastic, which just clamp on either side of the bird's tail to protect the feathers, because shredded feathers can be a problem for a bird that's as precisely controlled by the movement of its feathers as an eagle or other raptors are. So when I got there, I was able to get the bird out of the cage. The rehabilitator who actually had retrieved the bird and brought it to us, or arranged for it to get to us, was one of our very dear colleagues, Dana Lusher,
Right.
who is with Nature's Nanny. Dana was there, so she was had been signed up and recruited ahead of time to eagle wrangle for us, which involves, pulling the hood off, removing the tail guards, opening the doors, and helping me get the bird under control, because this was a relatively small bird, so he only had about a 6-foot wingspan. But 6 feet of eagle wings are still a big bird.
Right.
So we got it under control. Because I was running late, I didn't spend a whole lot of time with advanced chit chat. So we moved out into the area where the bird was released, and this was a bitey bird. So as soon as the hood came off, anything that got within range, he was biting it. So he bit the hood, tried to bite Dana, tried to bite me, tried to bite me on the chin, reached up, and snappy, snappy, snappy. So I spend a lot of time looking surprised and haughty with my nose in the air. So we counted it down, and I launched the bird off. And the area at Hoffler Creek is a relatively short open space, a corridor down through the woods. It's probably about 50 yards long from the headquarters building to the edge of the lake. And normally I am very, very reluctant to release an eagle over water for reasons I'll explain in a little while. But this bird, when I finally released him, he was the most nonchalant eagle that I have ever released. And by that, I mean, so he takes off flying. He's flying very, very strong. Well, there were people lined up kind of on both sides of the corridor. And I keep people back, but a couple of our photographers who were there, Michael Lemke who was there taking pictures for us and got some spectacular photos, by the way. So he was down there. So this eagle is flying along, just kind of looking down like, yo, how are you doing? Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm here. I'm flying off here. And it was almost comical. He was just so relaxed. But boy, when he got out of the trees, he came through the corridor and cleared out over the lake. Up he went. And he took off like a shot. So the TV folks from WTKR Channel 3 in Tidewater, their videographer was standing right behind me. And so she got a super shot of this bird going away and going up. So if you get the link off our site, you can really see it.
I've been to a number of releases with you. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Let me start with this one. When you get to the site, and we saw it in one of the videos that started this, how do you assess where you're going to release the bird? You look at the landscape, you take into consideration the weather, the wind, all that. Kind of walk us through that process a little bit.
Well, there are several things over the years that I've learned is you don't release a bird into a strong wind. So wind direction is actually pretty important. If it's gusty, coming and going, you just wait till it slows down and launch the bird. But if it's a prevailing wind or the gusts are extra strong and the gust cycle is pretty quick, you have to use the wind in your favor. So get the wind to your back to carry the bird away. Otherwise, as soon as the bird hits a gust of wind, he'll do a U-turn and head back in the wrong direction. The other thing is a lot of times the birds, depending on how far away the release site is and how long the bird has been in the cage, does he have a destination point, a tall tree, a place that he can go and roost, something of this nature. So I would never want to release one over a 500-acre field, because a lot of times when they're released, they've been in the box for sometimes 3 or 4 hours, and sometimes even more. If we're going to the eastern shore of Virginia or someplace quite far away. And so they're already stressed, they're already kind of worked up. And so I take them out of the box and hold them so that they can see, their eyes adjust to the light. And, people ask me all the time, oh, well, you hold the bird, that stresses him out. Being in a box for 4 hours driving in a car stresses him out. Taking him out is something he's been accustomed to while in the hospital, but it's much more important to allow him to sort of get his bearings and for his eyes to adjust to the bright light. And when people say, why don't you just open the door and let him go free? I remind people, if you're out in the snow and you suddenly come into the house, snow blindness is, or vice versa, you're in a dark house and you go out into the snow, the bright light just assails your eyes. And the same is true for eagles, and their eyes are far more sensitive than ours. So there's a logic to it. There's a reason for it other than just the show, as it would be. So in this case, the wind, the destination, the ability of the bird to fly over what I would call a safe area. So if the bird does fly out and go down right away, are we going to be able to recover it? As opposed to having, I had no students with me. So if the bird landed in the middle of the lake, I wouldn't have had anybody to send into the lake to get the bird. So
tell us a little bit about your strategy for getting a bird, an eagle, out of that carrier. Kind of what's your process? How do you work that through? And then what is it like to hold that bird and release it? That's an experience I'll never have, but you can tell me about it.
Well, getting the bird out, I've tried lots of different things over the years. The big thing is of course, I wear gloves that come all the way up to here. I should have thought to bring them in tonight. They live in my car. I've rescued animals with them. I've had these gloves for 30 years, I suppose, and they're specifically made for handling dangerous animals that either bite or claw. But my strategy now, and it works reasonably well, is I will reach in typically with my left hand, and I will grab one leg right above the foot and pin it to the floor of the cage. Well, the bird will get the other foot kind of bouncing around, but if I've got that foot pinned to the floor, he can't turn around because I've got his foot pinned down, and he's typically not going to grab me with the other foot. So that other foot may be going up and down, but trust me, it's a lot easier to catch one than it is to catch two that are after you, since they have 500 pounds of pressure per square inch. So getting control of the feet controls the bird. But then those 6-foot wings spread out in the cage, and getting them through an 18-inch door requires some agility and some jiggling. And that's the real value of having an eagle wrangler with me, having an assistant with me. If I can get both legs and then get them in one hand, I can take that other hand and push one wing down and then back the bird out, folded wing out first. And so if the other wing is still sticking into the cage, no big deal. Then once I get them out, it's a matter of always keeping control of the feet, because the feet are the things that'll ventilate you pretty quickly with those long talons. I mean, a great big female eagle, her halix, as they call it, the thumb, the talon on that can be 2.5 to 3 inches long and needle sharp. And with a grip, as I say, 500 pounds of pressure. I've got scars I probably couldn't show on the internet where I've been grabbed in various places by these eagles. But so the second weapon they use is their beak. And so it's a matter of control the feet, control the head. And that's typically done by holding them behind or up under their chin so they can't turn their head too much. Not with a stranglehold, but just encircling their neck. And then once you've got those two, then it's just a matter of getting the wings tucked in. And that's where, if I have an assistant, that's a pretty easy process. So all of our rehabbers, they can do this stuff blindfolded across the state. Dana Lusher, who was there with me on Tuesday, Dana's done this many, many times. She actually did her training at the Wildlife Center. So it's a pretty simple process. It looks far more dramatic than it is. Although I will have to say that on occasion, there have been times when I have reached for the eagle about the same time that the eagle reached for me. So we grasped each other's essence, let's just say. And that's one of the reasons when our rehabbers put the hood on them,
yeah,
it's so helpful. because then the eagle doesn't see you coming. The ones that are not hooded, and sometimes they put them in there, no hoods, no tail guards, no nothing. Eagle's in the cage, and you're eyeball to eyeball with the eagle, and the eagle knows you're about to reach in there and is taking aim. So, but it actually, after 94 eagles in the last 12 years, or 90, I guess in my case, I'm about to get the hang of it.
You say it's simple. I have a hard enough time getting one of my pet cats into a carrier. I can't imagine getting an eagle out of the carrier. But let's jump ahead. What's it like? Okay, you're ready to release. The birds had a chance to kind of acclimate. You're ready to go. Tell us how that feels. Tell us how that works. Tell us what you do.
Well, there's a kind of a timing thing, because you need to be sure the eagle is paying attention, not to you or trying to bite your chin, but is paying attention to where you want it to go. So with 2 feet coming down, well, I say 2 feet coming down, I like to get them underneath where I can put my index finger between the 2 legs and then grab the 2 legs this way. Feet are out here. So I can get that way because the legs are the strongest bones in the body of the eagle. So pushing up on those legs, their legs are like shock absorbers. I'm not going to do any damage under any circumstances to those legs. So that's how I hold the bird. I hold it by its head. And so when I launch the bird, my goal is to launch it straight up and slightly out in front of me. I'm not throwing it down range.
Right.
First of all, if you stop and think about it, a big female eagle, I've released them in the last year that weighed close to 14 pounds. That's as much as a concrete block. So I don't know how far you all out there can throw a concrete block, but that's about as far as you can throw an eagle. So the idea is to get the bird far enough off the ground so it can spread its wings and propel itself downrange. And so that's the goal. Now, I get a lot of teasing about the kick that I often do. When I release an eagle, one of my legs will kick back. Well, that's to keep me from falling over. Because if you are standing up, and you can try this at home, it's perfectly safe, not with an eagle, but with a concrete block, hold it out in front of you and see how well you do. And, or better yet, try to throw it 10 feet in the air, maybe not straight up, but it's my famous eagle kick is really a counterbalance so that I can remain upright after the eagle is gone. But then that's pretty much it. 1, 2, 3, and then launch the eagle straight up in the air. And that eagle will sort of hang there. Wings come out, it starts flapping, but it doesn't move very much right away. So people get some pretty good shots of that. And I've learned over the years, I continue to hold my hands up because it makes a much more dramatic photo, even though there's no real value to that, but people like it. So, and then the bird goes off. But once that bird leaves my hands, that's a free bird. And after that, not my problem.
Who knows which way it goes. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back with your gloves. Let's go back 30 years. The first eagle admitted to the Wildlife Center of Virginia.
Came in on a Friday afternoon in 1985. For the longest time, now eagles come in anytime, any day. But for the first 20 years, they never came in during business hours. And most of the time they came in the evening on weekends, and especially on holidays. Christmas Eve, big eagle night. It's Murphy's Law of wildlife medicine. But the first one that came in on a Friday evening, and I believe it was in March of 1985. I forget the exact date. But I got a call from a very dear friend, a fellow by the name of Bob Duncan, who was, I think, at that time, either a supervising biologist or maybe the assistant director of the wildlife division of then the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our wildlife agency. Said he had a bald eagle. Well, that was a pretty rare thing, because back in 1985, we only had about 50 nesting pairs in the whole state of Virginia. So they brought this bird to us late at night, We had it taken straight to Blue Ridge Community College, which is where the veterinarian with whom I co-founded the Wildlife Center, Dr. Stuart Porter. Dr. Porter was the head of the veterinary technology training program at Blue Ridge. And so we had a full veterinary hospital there. And so that's where our medical work was done, because our first rehabilitation center in 1985 was an old horse barn built in 1890s. And so we had no medical facility. We had a little room where we would change bandages and stuff like that, but certainly nothing that resembled a hospital. So the bird was taken to Blue Ridge, and it took very little time for Stuart to determine the bird had been poisoned based on the indications. Its pupils were dilating and fluctuating, and what's called astagmus. The bird's central nervous system was off. And back then, it was almost guaranteed that the bird had been poisoned with an organochlorine like DDT or chloridane or heptachlor, or organophosphates, like most of the other agricultural pesticides. And those are nerve agents, essentially. They kill their target pest by disrupting the nervous system, because they're all, well, back in those days, they were all derivatives of nerve warfare agents. And so the same chemicals used for soldiers to treat themselves if they've been exposed to nerve gas are the chemicals we use to counteract the pesticide, and the most common of which is the drug atropine. Atropine is not an antidote to the poison. It simply counteracts the symptoms of the pesticide. And so it's like if you've got a common cold and take an antihistamine, it doesn't cure your cold. It just keeps your nose from running and keeps you from sneezing as much. So that's what atropine does, keeps the heart going. So Stuart gave the bird atropine, and within just a few minutes, the bird was alert and acting like a normal eagle. Although at that time, we had almost no experience with normal eagles because we'd never seen one before, at least in our care. So that bird, fortunately, was released. Well, but we still wanted to know, how did it get poisoned? So I called Bob Duncan and said, we would like to find out, what was this bird exposed to? So he sent one of his field biologists back to interview the farmer, and they called us back with a list of chemicals that was astonishingly long. I mean, there were 15 or so chemicals on there, including fertilizers and pesticides and growth regulators and blah, blah, blah. So we get this long list of chemicals, and it's like, well, what do we do? And so we ended up calling the Veterinary Poison Control Center, which is at Texas A&M University, and it's a 24-hour emergency service. So we called and talked to the toxicologist there, said, okay, we've got a bald eagle, came in, and we know he's poisoned. Here is the list of chemicals that had been applied to the field in which the bird was found and recovered. So we got down the list, and we got to a chemical called Furoden. And the active ingredient, Furoden is the trade name. The active ingredient is carbofuran. And it's in the family of pesticides called carbamates. It's a neurotoxin, as many of the others are, but it's just a different mechanism. And as soon as we said that, the toxicologist said, bingo, that's it. That's horrible stuff. Here's what you do, whatever. And he told us how to treat it and what the symptoms were. And sure enough, that's what it was. So the biologist went back to the field, and you bet that stuff was just everywhere there. It was a granular pesticide. The color of the granules was bright fuchsia, very bright, kind of electric pink. And, it was causing a real problem in Virginia back then.
So what?
Time out. My dog is making noise with a noisy toy right below me.
Oh, dear.
Get out of the way. All right. I have recovered the noisy toy. The noisy toy is a plastic food tray that a little dog makes a lot of noise doing this. So, sorry.
So what did you do once you found out about the chemical? What was the next step?
Well, the next step was, we were naive. The Wildlife Center was launched in 1982. My conservation career began back in about 1970. I'll call it 78, which was really when I made the choice to move out of teaching and go into conservation for a living. But in 4 years, you don't learn a whole lot about the cold hard facts of life. So we thought, well, we found out what poisoned this eagle. We'll report it, and somebody will fix it. Well, we had a pretty hard, cold lesson there. We reported it to our state wildlife agency, who in turn reported it to the State Department of Agriculture, and then we reported it to EPA. And we waited for the black cars to pull up, and we waited and we waited and we waited, and pretty much nobody did anything. We reported it to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they were very interested, especially their law enforcement division, because we had been working with them on a number of cases. And still, even there, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was keenly interested, but the regulation of pesticide doesn't fall under the wildlife agencies. It falls under our Environmental Protection Agency, our USDA, and in Virginia, the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. And the reaction we got was, yeah, what do you want us to do about it? Well, we were pretty clear about what we wanted them to do about it, and they were pretty clear about, we don't care that much. We're here to support farmers, and farmers use this stuff, and, eagles don't vote. So it took us a while, but we kept this in the media. We started researching it, and we found out that there were people inside EPA who were also very, very concerned about the toxicity of this pesticide and its danger to non-target organisms. It was used, granular pesticide that was mixed in with the seed corn when the corn was planted. Its target pest are soil nematodes, or rootworms, as they are generally known. And it's a very effective pesticide. Trouble is, it doesn't just kill what you're trying to kill, it kills anything and everything that comes in contact with it. We found out that somebody in EPA, and at the time we didn't know who, was apparently protecting this chemical, which just sounded bizarre to us. It sounded like the theme of a bad movie. But we found out the Scientific Advisory Committee of EPA's Office of Pesticide Programs had repeatedly recommended that this chemical be banned because it was simply too dangerous to be used safely, even if you followed the directions.
Right.
So, this story can last for a lot longer than the time we have left. But the bottom line is we stayed on it. We kept it in the news. I became very interested in the comments of our state agency personnel here in Virginia. So the State Department of Agriculture actually was forced to convene what was called a special review. And so they opened up a comment period. Well, it turns out that our state entomologist at the time, and this was somewhere around 1986 or so, he sent a letter to the head of the pesticide programs, and they were buddies. They were part of the good old boy network. And our state entomologist, who was a professor at Virginia Tech, said, well, yeah, it's really true. This chemical is so bad, it kills everything. But we can't let the environmentalists get it, because if they get this one, then they're going to want another one and another one and another one. So my philosophy is never say die. Don't do anything. Well, this guy apparently did not know that comments submitted in response to a special review are public record. So I requested a copy of every letter that had been sent in. And when I found that from the guy who was supposed to be acting on behalf of the citizens of Virginia, I saw to it that our governor at the time, Chuck Robb, who was married to President Lyndon Johnson's daughter, Chuck was a friend but also very concerned about the environment as governor. So I sent him a copy of this letter. Well, the governor just went ballistic. And so essentially summoned this guy from Blacksburg to his office in Richmond and fired him. Because the guy was tenured, he didn't fire him from Virginia Tech. He couldn't. And so, frankly, the guy couldn't have cared less that he got fired as state entomologist. But that really was the spark. And so the governor that followed, Governor Robb, was I consider one of the great governors and a real hero of mine, the late Governor Jerry Beliles. And I had gotten involved in Jerry's political campaign and helped write the environmental platform of his campaign. So the next thing you know, Jerry wins, yay team. And I get appointed to the State Environmental Policy Board. And I was the first professional conservationist ever to sit on a state agency board. And I'm awfully proud of that. And in that position, then I was able to ask the questions. I was able to call people to testify. And the long and short of it is, when we really put the bright light on this, we found that Virginia's laws were horrible. The chemical was killing 2 million birds a year across the United States. We had gotten one. We've subsequently gotten a lot more now that we know what to look for. But because of that first eagle, because we were not satisfied with taking care of one bird and setting it free and, okay, we're done, we were interested in solving the problem, not simply addressing the symptoms. It took us years, but we finally got Virginia's laws changed. We finally had Virginia impanel a pesticide control board, and their very first regulatory action was to ban Furoden in Virginia, period, across the board. No uses, no applications, gone. That was on a Friday morning. Tuesday afternoon of the following week, the company withdrew the chemical from the market nationwide. 2 million birds a year in North America have not died. And that was about 28 years ago, something like that. So,
Okay, let's fast forward a little bit here. Let's go to 2011. Rock stars.
Rock stars.
The three eaglets from the Norfolk Botanical Garden nest. Mom Norfolk is killed by a plane at the Norfolk Airport, which is right next door to the Botanical Garden. Game department says, what are we going to do? We've got these three birds. Ultimately, they decide to come and bring them up to the Wildlife Center of Virginia. With them come, I don't know, 40 billion people who care about these birds. Tell us a little bit about that experience. Tell us a little bit about releasing those birds.
Well, yeah, you really cleaned up the story of the bringing of the birds, because our eagle ambassador Buddy was a sibling of those rock stars, and he had come to us 2 years earlier, 2 or 3 years earlier. And when we got Buddy out of that nest with a nest cam on it, he arrived at the Wildlife Center and brought with him 75,000 dedicated followers, all of whom had an opinion on how we should take care of Buddy, and most of whom shared it with us, sometimes vigorously. So when the next batch of eaglets from the same nest with the same group of followers that had now doubled in size, when Mom Norfolk was killed by a plane, it actually took the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries about a nanosecond to decide, we're not dealing with all these enthusiasts watching on the cam. We're going to take the birds to the Wildlife Center and let the Wildlife Center deal with all those folks. So we knew the birds were coming. The game department said, well, we're going to keep it a secret until we get the birds out of the nest. Well, that secret lasted about, again, a nanosecond. And so we found out through the grapevine, before the game department even called us, that they were pulling these birds from the nest and bringing them to us. And of course, then there was a moderated chat and an open chat that went along with the nest cam. The moderated chat was very civil, under very strict control of our beloved Congo Wings and Shoe Button and the various other moderators that were active at the time.
Yep.
Yeah. The open chat was, let's just say, it was chaos online and completely wide open and unregulated. Well, we contacted the moderators and basically said, okay, if you will have people not call us and tie up our phone system, not email us and choke our servers, which is what happened the first time, and let us get the birds and evaluate them, I personally, Ed Clark, will come on to the moderated discussion the day we get the birds, which was a Wednesday, and I will stay there as long as it takes to answer everybody's question. Now I realize what a foolhardy promise that was. So the birds were supposed to get to us at 11 in the morning. They got there at 2:45 in the afternoon, and I had promised to be online at 3 o'clock. So I had 15 minutes to figure out the status of the birds, gather information, go log on to my computer, and there were 16,000 people logged into the chat waiting for me. And I was there for, as I recall, about 2.5 hours answering questions. And it was, but it was very, very rewarding, I must say. Some of the questions were off the wall. Some of the suggestions were, oh, I've heard about this animal whisperer who can come in and faith heal the animals, but it's, what, and it's like, okay, fine, good for you. But the bottom line was people were deeply invested in these animals. So while it had been in our strategic plan to put up webcams, the plan was to put them up over a 3-year period. When we found out on Tuesday that these birds were coming, we got them on Wednesday. Our very first streaming webcam went live at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. So instead of a 3-year implementation of that strategic goal, we had a 48-hour implementation of the goal. And people think I'm kidding when I say we strung the cables by just laying them on the ground.
Yeah.
We ran coaxial cable from the Wildlife Center's main building up to the flight cage in which these baby eagles were housed in our fake eagle nest by simply unrolling it on the ground and putting little flags in and little signs every so often that says, step on this and you'll die.
Right.
And so people who were not regular nest cam watchers logged in, and there were the eagle chicks, but the nest wasn't in a tree anymore. And so it took several days, but the first day that we got those birds and had them online, we had in that one day, 30,000 people visited our website in one day. Now, the previous year, we had 64,000 people spread over a year. We had 30,000 people in one day. Well, not only did it crash our website, it crashed the hosting service for our website, which was run by our local telephone company.
Right.
So our local telephone company crashed because of the enthusiasm of Eagle Nation. And so I called over there and said, we got to do something about this. And so I talked to some 20-something technician. He says, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll just shut it down for the weekend and we'll deal with this on Monday. And he hung up on me, and it was like, no, that isn't going to work. Well, unbeknownst to him, the president of the telephone company is an old friend and who ended up marrying somebody with whom I used to work. And so I called him at home and said, we can't have this. Well, within 3 minutes of hanging up with this guy, this technician called back and said, I was just kidding. So 30,000 the first day, 40,000 the second day. And over the succeeding, from the beginning of the launch of this video to for the first 5 days, we had 250,000 hits on our website. And from then on, it was like, okay, this is a public process. So we had cameras on the chicks through their whole tenure at the Wildlife Center, 4 or 5 months. One of our beloved former interns, Dr. Miranda, who was on call one night, got called out of bed because bears were trying to eat the eagles, the eagle chicks. And sure enough, the webcam showed a little bear walking by the outside of the cage. He wasn't doing anything, he was just walking by, but they thought, oh my God, the bear's going to eat the eagle chicks. So Dr. Miranda comes in to check on the chicks, wearing her fuzzy slippers, carrying her flashlight and a stick, which conjures quite an image. Another night, one of the eagle chicks was missing, and it was an emergency. So 3 o'clock in the morning, they call, oh my gosh, one of the chicks is missing. You've got to go find him. Well, he wasn't actually missing. He had just simply fallen out of bed. The nest was about 2 feet off the ground, and he had simply walked off the edge. So he was sound asleep, just sitting on the ground, whatever. But again, poor Dr. Miranda's out there with her flashlight and her stick. And so we had to retrain Eagle Nation. Falling out of bed is not a medical emergency. But so that finally, the day came, we could release these birds. So we had these 3 chicks, and we had 2 others that were siblings. And quite honestly, as special as these birds were to the members of then Eagle Nation, they were just eagle chicks to us. We had 5 others that year. So we had a total of 8 that year, but we had 2 others the day we got ready to release these birds that we thought, well, we're going to turn them loose at the same time. So we made arrangements with Berkeley Plantation down in Charles City County, east of Hopewell, Virginia, right on the banks of the James River. And Berkeley Plantation is the former home of one of Virginia's colonial governors. And they are a very popular tourist destination. So they have parking for a lot of people. And so we knew we'd have a lot of people for this. We announced it, but we had no idea that 1,200 people would show up for that eagle release. And we got a show of hands, roughly counting, we had 22 states represented. People had traveled, in some cases, all the way across the United States to be there to watch this eagle release. And of course, at about, 11 o'clock in the morning when we got there, the temperature was 95 degrees.
It was so hot. Oh, golly, it was hot.
Oh, the humidity was about 210%. And so it was just a miserably hot, oppressive day. And these folks were sitting out there in the sunshine, and they weren't moving. They weren't going in the shade. They were sitting there. So we ended up having different people release the different birds. I think I released 2, and then we had Dr. Dave, who was the veterinarian who cared for them, or at least in charge of the team that cared for them. He released 1. Dr. Miranda, who was a postdoc at the time, she released 1. Guy named Steve Loving, who is a biologist with the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, who had been really the guy who had managed this nest and had really been responsible for this eagle program. Steve released 1, and so it was quite a day, quite a time. And my friend Bob Duncan, who I alluded to earlier in the Carbofuran story, by this point, Bob had been promoted, and he was the executive director of the agency. And it was quite an experience for him. He said in his, at that point, probably 25 years career in wildlife, he had never seen that many people gathered for what essentially was a celebration of wildlife. And it was great. And of course, the one bird who was always a drama queen was a bird. We identify them. We never name our patients, as you know, Randy, but this bird they had research bands on their ankles, and there was NX, and there was NV, and there was N somebody else.
NV maybe?
Yeah. But NX, there should have been something that warned us that NX was the drama queen. She was always a little slower than the other ones, a little smaller, little less mature, didn't make good judgments about her friends and associates, that sort of thing. But the bottom line was she is the one on which we chose to put a transmitter. Well, we've learned from that experience, you don't put the transmitter on the day you're going to release the bird.
Right.
Handling her to put the transmitter on her, she got a little stressed out. Launch her into the air. She flies 500 yards, lands on the ground, and takes off running. And of course, about half the crowd takes off running after her to get pictures. And fortunately, we got there first. We got her. We picked her up out of the bushes, brought her back, put her in the van, turned the air conditioning on frigid air, trying to cool her down, calm her down, thinking we could release her again. So we waited until the crowd had gone. We didn't tell this to anybody at the time that she had been recaptured and taken back into captivity. So we released her a second time. This time she flew about 300 yards and took off running. And it was an epic foot chase to catch her the second time. So we brought her home to the Wildlife Center. Most of the folks had no idea. So we kept her about another 6 weeks, maybe almost 2 months. And then we re-released her with transmitter when she was a little older, a little stronger at the Rappahannock River National Wildlife, or Rappahannock River Valley.
We took her back to Berkeley. We took her back to Berkeley for that second release.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Yep.
So, that's right. That's right. We took her back to Berkeley, released her there. She was out for about 10 months and then got hit by a car.
Right.
Eating roadkill.
Yeah.
That's it. You are so right. It's been so long ago. So the second release, she flew off and did eagle stuff, and that was all fine. But because she had the transmitter, we knew she had moved to, I guess, Middle Peninsula, between the York and Rappahannock River. And then was eating roadkill, got hit by a car while eating a deer that had been killed by a car in the road. And so she was rescued by an animal control officer, brought back to us, and kept for 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. And we returned her to the Rappahannock River Valley National Wildlife Refuge, where our dear friend Lauren Cruz is the head biologist, and we still work closely with her. And before a small crowd, we returned NX to the wild, and that transmitter proved to be as epic as the bird and the personality. We tracked that bird for years, and then the transmitter simply went dark. And we knew that was normal because the batteries are guaranteed for 2 years. A lot of times we'll get 3 years out of them. This one worked about 3.5 years before it finally croaked on us. And then all of a sudden, about 5 years after we released this bird, this battery had one last gasp, and it came to life for a few days. And NX was still out there doing eagle stuff, still living in the area, had matured by then, and proved that raising the rock stars in captivity and subsequently releasing them to the wild not only was popular, but it was successful.
It worked. Absolutely.
It worked.
Let's think back, Ed. Think back over your time at the Wildlife Center. Give me your 2 best eagle release stories.
Well, that's an easy question, as you know. That's an underhanded softball pitch question, because the 2 that stand out, and both of these were before 2008. So this is before we were counting, and so of the 94 we've released since 2008, I've probably released about 88 of those. I'll say there are probably half a dozen that other people have released, including some the day of the rock stars. But the Berkeley plantation where we released the rock stars, right next door is Westover Plantation. And Westover Plantation is also the home of a former Virginia governor and goes back to the early 1700s. The house, the formal gardens, it's a magic place.
Beautiful place.
beautiful place owned by my dear friends, Fred and Mushi Fisher. And I met Fred, actually. He was an assistant attorney general for environmental agencies for a long time back in the 1980s. And his wife is just lovely as well. And they were so gracious to us. So we would take eagles there to release them. And the reason for that is back in the 1980s and early 90s, there still were not many eagles in Virginia. And so it was more important for us to release eagles where there were other eagles, as opposed to simply taking them back to the area from which they had come, because that they may have been the only eagles in that area. And especially for young eagles that learn how to be eagles by emulating what they see other eagles doing, or stealing fish from ospreys, or they generally grow up as thugs, stealing fish as a way to feed themselves before they learn to catch their own fish. But this particular area of the James River, east of the city of Hopewell, is a very wide, shallow part of the James River, and very abundant in fish. And at that time, it had the highest population of bald eagles in Virginia, and actually probably still does. I personally had my boat out on that stretch of the river back in the 1990s and counted 98 eagles in 2 hours, covering about 5 miles of that river. So it was a popular place. And so Westover is right in the middle of it, easy access, dear friends that owned it. And so we would often take eagles there. Well, we had one bird that had come in, and at this point, we still had not really gotten into major social media stuff. And this was a bird that needed to go back to the wild. The weather was turning bad, and it was Christmas Eve. And a heavy snowstorm was coming in. I don't remember what year this is. I could go back and probably find it by the weather reports. But I had a 4-wheel drive Toyota pickup truck with heavy snow tires on it. So I put the Eagle in the back of the truck, and late in the afternoon, I took off to Westover Plantation. No public, no announcement, no anything. We just needed to get this bird out before the holidays, because once they get ready to go, they become very animated and they can injure themselves in the cage. So I took this bird back to Westover, drove into the plantation. Everybody was gone. All the workers were gone. Fred and Mushi were apparently gone for the holidays. So I was there, this 1,200 acre or whatever plantation, and I drove out to the place right in the middle of a big soybean field, and the snow was pelting. It was a whiteout. Pulled this young eagle out of the cage and got him ready to go. And there was no fanfare. Got him situated, comfortable, calmed down, launched him off, and this bird takes off flying into the snow. And as it flew, its image grew dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, and finally was gone in the heavy snow. And I will never forget that. It was as if that bird had flown from this world through some sort of intergalactic door, some other plane, and it just simply disappeared back to where it was supposed to be. I'll never forget that. It was magic. And I think if anybody else had been there to see it, it would have spoiled it. But just the eagle and I were there, and then just I was there. And it brought it all in. That was a really good Christmas for me. That was just a heck of a Christmas present. So that's number one. That's my all-time favorite. The second one actually took place probably around, I'll say 1990-ish, because we still weren't getting many eagles, and we still didn't have a social media to go to bring crowds to our events. So this is a bird that needed to go back. And so we would occasionally call the media, and this bird went back to West Point, Virginia. And the biologist said, we think the bird had been, I think, hit by a truck. But they said, we think this bird is part of a nesting pair that, and at that point, we had fewer than 100 nesting pairs in Virginia.
Right.
And this nesting pair produced triplets every year. So she was pretty important. So it was important for us to take her back right to the spot from which she'd been found, or in which she'd been found. So I did, went back to the same spot. There was a TV guy there and he's filming, and launched the bird off. The guy watches her flying away, and she flies away and sits in a tree, and okay, we're done. So I'm sitting there chatting with this reporter as he packs up his TV stuff, and he gets his camera, puts it away, his tripod, everything, puts it back in the car. And all of a sudden, as we are standing there, it's just the two of us, we hear this scream. And we looked over, and the eagle I had just released is sitting on a tree out about 150 yards, and you can see her neck looking around, and it's as if she's just recognized that she knows where she is. And she lets out this blood-curdling scream, eagle scream, and back over in the trees, another eagle answers it, responds to it. And so we are there listening to these birds, and all of a sudden the eagle I had released flew straight up into the air, and out of the woods another eagle flew straight up to meet her in midair, and they're just screaming at each other, and they locked talons in midair and started tumbling to the ground. Well, anybody who didn't know better would think they were fighting, but that is part of the mating ritual, part of the pair bonding ritual. And it was her mate. She'd been gone for 7 weeks. When we released her, we took her home. Her mate was still there guarding the nesting site. We got her back in time. So they did, in fact, nest that year, and they did in fact produce triplets again that year. But it was one of those moments that there's more going on than simply the mechanics of fixing broken birds and setting them free. So those are my two favorites.
Those are two good stories, Ed. Well, we've come toward the end of our time here, and we've also kind of moved. If you think about the history of releasing eagles at the Wildlife Center, we started with the relatively small private events. We moved to large public events. We moved to the largest public event, but they became an important part of the Wildlife Center outreach, is encouraging people to come to eagle releases. And someday we'll be doing those public releases again. And if you ever have the chance, I strongly encourage you to go and watch these scenes. Ed told the Richmond Times-Dispatch one time that every time he released a bald eagle, his heart stopped. And having watched this happen many times, I can tell you that I understand why his heart stops, because my heart stops as well. They're great events, and someday we're going to be back and have those public events. Earlier this year, we released a bald eagle. Ed took the eagle back actually to the very home, the very neighborhood where this eagle was released. Because of COVID, it was not a public event. Again, it was a very small event. But our colleague Aaron has created a video to talk about that release, and we're gonna share that video with you as we say goodnight. But Ed, thank you so much for your time here this evening. Thank you so much for your stories, and most importantly, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service to the Wildlife Center. Thank you for your service to bald eagles.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, it's my privilege and pleasure. And people ask me, in fact, just a couple of days ago, somebody said, well, when are you going to retire? It's like, why would I do that? The stuff that I get to do and get paid for is stuff that there's not enough money in the world to buy the experience. And but the real thanks go to the people watching this little session on YouTube, and the people who support the Wildlife Center, because I can tell you, without the support of our donors, our contributors, our friends, our collaborators, our colleagues across the wildlife rehabilitation community, wildlife medicine community, our friends and collaborators in our state and federal wildlife agencies, we wouldn't save a single animal. So it is actually to you the real thanks are due. And on behalf of all of our colleagues at the Wildlife Center, our volunteers, our students, and especially our patients. And there have been somewhere in the ballpark of 85,000 so far since we started back in 1982. Thanks, and enjoy the video, and good night.
Thank you all. Take care.
We are in Gloucester, Virginia, and we are in the release of an eagle. Yeah, I was doing my homework in there, and then Mom says there's an eagle in the backyard. I'm like, what? And then we walked out, and it was trying to fly, but it couldn't fly.
Yep, I grabbed Lydia, and we could tell it was hurt, so her and I kept our distance but followed it just to keep an eye on it.
So we followed it because we knew if I don't know how to call it, what they are called, but the people who would come and rescue the animal, if they came, that we should follow it to keep an eye on it so we knew where it went.
Kept hitting some barbed wire and stuff, so we were really worried about it. And then it ended up in this pile of sticks and would not move from there.
So I called my dad in tears because nobody would pick up, or they wouldn't come out here. And I was crying because I thought it was gonna die out here. But then Dad came and saved it.
I got a phone call. I was cooking dinner, got a phone call. My daughter called, said she's seen a bald eagle on the ground and it was hurt, it wouldn't fly. So, I don't know, it was about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I just said, well, if nobody's gonna go and rescue, the bald eagle, I might as well go ahead and try, So I did. So I came out to this field at night and had a blanket, and I just put the blanket over top of the eagle. It was very docile. It wasn't, aggressive. Picked her up, got a couple pictures for myself, and then we transferred her to a emergency clinic. Yeah, York County, to an emergency clinic, 24-hour emergency clinic. And then they obviously called you guys, to come and get her and rehabilitate her. It's really, really cool. I would say the mood of the bird was definitely different. The first encounter with her, she was very docile, and yeah, she was on the defensive a little bit, but seeing her today, she was wide-eyed, she was ready to go.
absolutely amazing,
Yeah.
breathtaking.
Yeah, it was definitely a cool experience.
It just felt, I don't know how to say it. It just felt good to see it fly off. And now it's out in the wild and it's home again.